Okay, so today we are going to create a new character for the player to fight. This will be the Flayed Mage. Over here on the right, you can see we have the basics configured. We have a box collider 2D. We have a rigid body 2D that's set to kinematic. And then of course we have the Corgi components that control, gravity, speed, how it reacts to slopes. And of course we have the platform mask configured correctly to ground and platforms. This is very important. We have two layers that are considered surfaces. And then these right here should be populated by default to the correct values. And then we have a character component that tells us that this is an AI and that its initial facing direction is right. You can see he is facing right. We've set the character animator. So in here you can see that's nested in the hierarchy, which is perfect. We don't need to change anything here. Character model is the same as the animator in this case. This is how we flip the character, so it's going to be flipping this game object. We have some other settings here: rotate model on direction change. This is how we handle flipping, so either we use scale or we use rotation. In this case, we're using rotation. So these are the basics for an enemy. Our goal today is to make this enemy walk around and jump. He's not going to attack the player yet, and he's not going to use any spells or any abilities. The only ability we're going to be implementing today is movement and possibly jump. So the first thing here you'll see is that we have a character horizontal movement component. This allows us to move the character left and right, and it does some other detections, such as whether it's hitting the ground or there's friction. And I believe it's necessary for jumping. There is a jump ability that we'll get to, but I think you have to have this as a base for that to work. A couple important things here is the speed settings. We're not going to tweak this yet, but you can change the speed of the character in this script. And if you're controlling it with a controller, you can set some of these values here as well. There's a couple feedback scripts that are interesting, like a feedback you can play when he touches the ground, and feedbacks you can play when he starts moving and when he stops moving. So some interesting things there if you want to make it react to different states. So now we're going to add what is called a platform agent. And this script is important because it gives the AI the ability to intelligently patrol an area or to move towards a target. The first thing we're going to configure is the ground mask. We're going to set this to ground and platforms, very similar to what we did on the Corgi controller. And then we're also going to set the caster. So the caster is the position on the character that the ray casts start from. So this is how we do detection. So on here, we're going to create a new component. We're going to call this caster. And then we'll move this up here, right around there. And we'll just zero this out to a nice solid number. Okay, so now that we got that configured, let's drag it in. So we're going to drag that into here. Let's make sure we set the other ones. So we're going to do one-way platforms, and we'll do moving platforms. We'll do all the platforms that we can. In fact, it might be even better for us to update that on the other characters, but we'll do this for now. And caster's now set. So let's take a look at these settings. So now that we know where our caster is, these are the settings that we use to check different things. So this is the gap check. So for example, this is considered a gap. It's actually a ledge, but if you had another platform over here, it would be a gap. Let's actually create a gap. So inside of the palette, we're going to erase some tiles. And we'll make this a fairly deep gap. I'm not going to make it all the way deep, but that's good enough. So this is considered a gap. And this tells us how far to check the gap. So This is 3 units wide, and this is set to 4. So this is actually a gap that can be crossed by the minion. And this down ray distance is how far down to check. So it will check 1.5 down and then 1 over. We'll find that gap, and then it will check to see if it's within 4. And then the fall ray distance is set to 8. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is actually considered too tall to fall in. So the gap check will either check to see if he can jump or if he can fall down. And if he can't do either one, then he will stop moving. And at that point, we can make a decision. We can tell the character to go backwards, and this can create like a patrol. If we give the character a jump ability, he'll actually be able to jump this gap because we set this to 4, and that's the maximum distance that this character can jump. So just to repeat, this is the maximum distance of the gap. This is how far down to go before you go over 1 unit. So he's always searching for a gap by doing this L shape, and then he'll find it. He'll check, and then he'll do all of that. The wall check is same idea here. So if we build a wall, let's just grab this. Let's build a wall, and what I'm going to do too is I'm going to hide the UI so we don't see it in our face here. All right, cool. So we build a wall, and this wall is what this character will check against. So forward ray distance is 4, so he's always searching 4 units in front of him for a wall. And the reason why we do this is to give the player time to jump. Sometimes they need a little bit of a gap to be able to make that a clean jump. 4 may be a bit too long, but we'll keep it for now. And the wall ray distance is how far up to go. So if we remember, this is where our caster is. So if it hits here, it's gonna ray cast out this way if he's walking this way. We're gonna go up 3.75 units to see if we can clear this wall. And in the case of this current setting, 3.75 isn't enough. Right, it'll be like right around here. So it can't clear this wall, it will give up. If it's 5, for example, it will go 5 up from this point, and it will be able to clear the wall. I'm going to say that 3.75 is actually a pretty good distance for the mage. I think it'd be pretty crazy if he can jump that wall, so we'll keep that for now. And then we have the fall edge distance. Honestly, I forget what this is. It seems very similar to the ray distance, but we'll come back to this. And then there's some gizmo settings if you want to see like what his current goal is and how the wall detection's working and the gap detection, if you want to check out what the fall does. Okay, so now that we set that up, what we're going to do is we're going to create a behavior tree. And that's going to also add a blackboard where we can add variables. We're going to want to create a new behavior tree. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to actually find where the flayed minion is. Which that didn't quite work. Let me see. We have peeler. I'm setting it to peeler so I can actually find it. And that will allow me to create a new behavior tree here. So we're going to right click, create. And we're going to create the, might have been easier just to use the, oh here we go. Paradox notion, node canvas, behavior tree asset. And that didn't quite work. Let's try that one more time. Behavior tree asset, there we go. We're going to call this behavior tree flayed mage. And then in here, we're going to just drag this in. And everything else is set up correctly. Okay, so let's open the behavior tree. We have a fresh canvas here. And let's add a subgraph, subtree. And then we can actually click this radio button and type, or it's actually at the top, but we can type, wonder. And we can reuse this behavior to make our character walk. And going back to move distance, you can actually see it uses the platform agent component, which is why we set that up. You can see that it's given us an error saying that this character or this behavior tree does not have this variable. So we can actually click this plus button to promote it to a variable. And we can either do the mage flayed minion blackboard, or we can do the graph. I wouldn't do graph. I would always do this top option for the character. And this will add our wander range. Let's give it the same. Let's do 50. We can tweak this, of course, if we wanted to like wander within a smaller range. And this character will actually just keep repeating this node indefinitely, because down here you can see we have the repeat checkbox turned on. So this will actually repeat this behavior tree over and over. And you can see our value has been added to this as well. Okay, cool. So let's hit play and see if it works. And you can see he's walking. And he fell. Okay, so now we're in this view. And let's just hit play and see. He's not detecting that, is he? Interesting. Let's turn on. Okay, there we go. Did that work? Okay, so looking at this. Oh, okay. So the reason why he's falling is because he thinks he can clear this gap. And so he's just going to keep walking. It has nothing to do with the fall distance. So let's fix that. So one thing we can do is we can shorten this, or we can add the jump ability. So there's a ability called character jump. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move the abilities so they're together. I'm actually going to apply all of this. And then I'm going to go inside of the prefab, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to drag it up so it's next to the other character script. Okay, let's take a look at this. So the number of jumps is 2. We're going to set that to 1. We're going to keep the jump height the same. And we'll keep that as well. Everything looks good. What this will do now is the platform agent component, if it detects that there's a jump ability, it will call it. And let's get rid of that health error too. So let's just add the health component. And I think for now we'll just keep this as default. Alright, let's see if he jumps. He might not be moving fast enough to clear that, so that's kind of frustrating. Jump height. I'm gonna lower that down to like 1. We'll do apply. And then horizontal movement. We could increase that, but let's go to the platform agent and let's just shrink this down to 1. So we'll make his gap very short. And we're actually going to test this as well. So let's move him back here, and then let's make a gap. Let's just erase one of these gaps here. We'll see if he can clear that. And he just walked right over that, so that's fine. And you can see that he can't jump over this, so that's good. Okay, we're not going to worry about this. I think there's some improvements we could make to the character, but for now that's fine. And yeah, since he can't jump very high either, we might as well like jack his wall check up higher, so, or lower. So like this is 3, he can probably only go like 1. Apply. Yep, and then we'll shorten this down to 1 as well. And then the edge is 1 down, that's fine. Maybe we could do 0.5. That gets it a little closer to the edge, so like he won't jump until he's like right on the edge. But let's see if he walks back and forth within that range now that we fixed his jump and his gap distance. Very slow. So he'll wait 3 seconds here, and then he'll turn around and walk this way. And he's not walking yet either, so he's playing his idle animation. We're going to fix that next. But he should reach this wall. He can't go any further, so he'll turn around. So now we have a character that walks back and forth. He patrols. So next, we're going to update his animation system to work with the platform agent. And we're going to reference the cutter cop to do this so that I don't have to dig into any code and like memorize values. But yeah, let's jump into the flayed minion and take a look at what we have here. So first thing I always do is check the layers. It looks like everything here is set up correctly. Yep, we got all this as well. That's good to see. So in order to get this working, we want to switch between idle and walk. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename these so that they're a little easier on the eyes. So we already have body, legs, gun, eye. So we already know what the layers are, so we don't need to include them in the name. So we'll just change this to idle. And we'll change this to walk. And actually before I do that, let me actually do this. So there's this really nice setting called sync. We're actually going to sync these layers with the body layer. So on legs, I'm going to set this sync, and then we're going to sync it with the body layer. And you'll see it actually changes the names, which is what we want. And I'm going to do the same here as well. Sync, so now it looks just like body, and this one as well. And now what we can do is we can rename these. So we're going to change this one to, this is another reason why we want to rename them to something simple like idle, because it's going to be idle on every layer. We're going to do the same here for walk. And then in the idle, we're going to keep the body layer the same with walk, but on legs, you'll see it's empty, and we actually need to set this, we type idle. We want mage flayed idle legs, and the same for walk. And I'm going to do the same for the rest of these. Okay, so we don't need to do anything for these. I thought maybe there was something for the mage, his eyes, but it looks like there isn't. So we'll just keep this off. So we can set this to none. Now that we have everything synced up with the body, we can modify the body layer and the transitions will apply to each one, and now we don't have to worry about any layer desynchronizing with the body. So if we tell body to like walk, legs, gun, and eyes will also walk. So we're going to change this. We're going to do a make transition down to walk, and then we're going to transition back up to idle. So now the animations can go from idle to walk and walk back to idle. And then we're going to want to copy some parameters over. So on the cutter cop, if you look at this, you'll see we have a couple values here that we could copy over. So I wonder, can we just copy these over? That'd be fantastic. I don't think I can. Okay. I think a better example would be the nun. The nun's a little bit simpler to look at because she uses a different philosophy for the animation. So we're going to drag her in, and we'll take a look at the behavior tree here. So it looks a little bit more chaotic, but we're just interested in this part. So in order to walk, we check to see if walking is true, and then we check if walking is false. So that's pretty easy. We'll just set that up in the same way as the nun. So going back to here, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to add a boolean called is walking. Idle to walk is true, and then walk back to idle is false. And that should be everything we need to get this working. And like I said, this syncs it up on every layer. Not walking. Let's take a look at the error messages and see. Okay, interesting. Let's take a look at her animation and see why she's not switching. Is walking is not true. Ability. Oh, it's just walking. I made a mistake. So on here, we want to set this to walking. Nice thing about renaming it here is it will update automatically in the inspector. So renaming stuff doesn't break the transitions. And you can see It's kind of walking. The legs aren't moving. So let's take a look at that. Maybe I forgot something here. So the legs are kind of messed up. This will override the body. We have to override as well because maybe I need to do one. Let's do this. We want these to override the body layer, so let me see if that will do it. The thing is if the body layer is modifying the legs, and then the legs try to modify as well, it gets overridden. And the weight was 0, so it was being ignored entirely, so I set that to 1 so that it overrides the body. But you got to be careful when you're animating. You need to isolate all your bones so that it correctly does this. So the legs walk should only modify legs. The body should only modify the body portion. It shouldn't modify anything with that. Let's see if this looks correct with the idle transition. I don't know why that gun is there. Yes, I don't think it's transitioning fast enough. Let's take a look at this. When I talk about the transition, I'm talking about when it hits this and the code says stop, but this takes a second. See, that transition took some time. So what I like to do with this is I like to make it very quick. There is merit to using these settings, but for me, I just like turning them off. First, I set this to 0, the exit time to 0, and then I turn off has exit time. We can keep the transition duration. That's fairly quick. It's it's like a quarter of a second. And then going back here where you want to change this one, we're going to set this to 0 as well and uncheck that. We'll keep the other one on. All right, it's walking. Let's see if he stops moving. Yep, that looks way better. So yeah, exit time can be useful, but it's also can cause some delay with AIs when they're trying to do attacks or when they're moving. So yeah, we've successfully set up a character who can walk. Okay, so we actually made one mistake that we're going to be fixing with the caster, so we're going to look at that next. If the caster is above the block, it won't be able to detect it, so we're going to actually go down just a little bit here, and you can see this will actually hit the block. So that's important to configure correctly. All right, let's give that a shot. Yeah, there we go. She had to do another take, but yeah, that's working pretty good. All right, yeah, so this is how you create a character that can platform, he can move, it can detect walls, gaps, and yeah, you can tweak the numbers and you can create new AIs that walk around the map. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Have a wonderful day.